It'd be a shame that they get it wrong, and it detracts from what is really an amazing fan base that were so starved for so long, and now just when it gets good, just when the whole thing starts to pop up, that they're priced out of the market. That shouldn't happen either.
Each week, I produce a 1 hour long, roughly, audio podcast, which is available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. An audio podcast, but it's recorded via Zoom because we're not all together, which means that former players and managers join us as well, which is great. And this week, Niall Quinn was our special guest. And by the way, thanks to everybody who subscribes and listens to that podcast. It is free to anybody. So share and let everybody know about that. Now, I don't post up the full hour-long video version. Of course, you can listen to the hour-long audio version. But from time to time, I put up a video version of maybe a shortened extract from it, and this is an example of that. There were two other guests, Annabelle and Stephen, on the podcast as well, but I've just took out the bits of Niall Quinn talking about three different subjects, which I hope you'll find quite interesting. First of all, asking him about the reason that City are not what they were in the previous seasons and after the defeat at Forest. Then about Erling Haaland and the nuances of his game and why he's not scoring as much at the moment. Is it down to him? Is it down to supply? Is it a weak tactic? That sort of thing. And then a third one, which is about his opinions as a former chairman of Sunderland, as well as being a former player, what he thinks about the Stop Exploiting Loyalty campaign, generally, not just in City, but in the Premier League, and whether he can see the merits or those against the way that, shall we call them, traditional match-going fans are now dealt with in terms of pricing and loyalty versus the attraction of deep-pocketed visitors who come and watch games from time to time, but put lots of money into the coffers of the club. So I hope you'll enjoy this. Don't forget to subscribe, like, ring the bell, all that sort of thing, and hope you enjoy it. And I'll be back, of course, at the next match, which is Brighton at home. Is Pep too rigid in the way that he thinks? I mean, we all know he's a genius, and I'm not in any way questioning his genius, but is he a little bit too slow, perhaps, in his rigidity of changing tactics? And did Forest simply want it more in the team? Is that something that City are being out-battled?
Well, so the first thing I'd think of, okay, Man City going through a period that is unrecognizable compared to all of the other Pep years. That's no reason to forget all about how great Pep has done. And he believes in his way of doing things, and all managers have to be like that. So you call it stubborn. I would say Alex Ferguson was the most stubborn manager I came across, and he was the most successful in my time. And that hurt us at Man City, as you know, at that timing. We had a nice little team coming along. We'd finished fifth twice. There was no Champions League for the first four then because we were in the 90s. We were still coming out of the Hazel sort of ban and what had happened in that terrible time. So Alex Ferguson came along and he turned Manchester United into something unrecognisable. Pep Guardiola did that too, in many respects. I know City had won a league title before he got there, had won a couple that, two managers done great before him, but where he brought it to was a whole new level. So now that the dip is down, I'm not to start, complaining and saying, oh, he's got a real flaw here. I don't think he has a flaw. I think he just wants to get his players back up onto that standard. And he knows the way he wants to play. But when things aren't going wrong, I tell you what, you soon forget about all the good times. I see Capello had a right go today, the former England manager, who said what he's done has been a disaster for football. He's killing the game by the the way the ball is tiptoed across from goalkeeper to centre back, etc. And there's something in that. I have to say, I'm not saying he's killed the game, but I do think when you're two centre backs and your goalkeeper, the players with the most touches on the pitch, it's I suppose it's new and everybody's trying it, and some people can do it better than others. But as an oldie, I like watching the highlights now, right, than sitting through 90 minutes. But having said that all mounts on you. If City were still firing the way they were, the genius is still what we'd be talking about. Look, he's a hell of a job in his hands. He's also had some personal difficulties as well, which come into play. Sometimes they're even more important than what we're talking about. So my view on it is we'll forgive him this one if he gets into the top four again. Not easy from the position they're in right now today. It'll be a hell of achievement if they do, and a reset of a team is what I'm looking forward to. Not so much the reset of his beliefs, but how he gets a team to actually come out and do that better than other teams. Like, why did Liverpool kick on and Man City come back? Is it just because of Pep's stubbornness? I don't think so. I think there's a lot more ingredients in that soup. You know, the soup has gone a bit cold, if you like. Um, and you would be crazy to think that the hierarchy would see somebody else might be able to get that back instead of him. He has to be given some time, and as you call his stubbornness, I would call the genius bit that you spoke about to give him some sort of reset time between now and the start of next season. You know, he's contracted. Be very interesting to see if they will give him the firepower to go and get another Haaland or two. You know, that would sort things out pretty quickly.
Erling Haaland is a big discussion point because if he scores, then he's the best striker in the world, and you can't really argue with his statistics. But when he doesn't score, then everybody tends to blame the supply. You know, the wingers haven't got the ball to him, or De Bruyne wasn't fit and didn't get the ball through to him. The strikers I've enjoyed most watching down the years, I'm not going to be saying anything revolutionary here by saying Aguero, who could produce a goal out of nothing. I loved watching Trevor Francis when he was playing because he was a player who seemed to be able to produce it on his own. He was a team player, of course, but could produce bits of magic on his own. And now, at the moment, I would suggest that Erling Haaland is a player who we built the team around him, and obviously trying to exploit this fantastic goal scoring record he has. But I wonder whether that sometimes can make us a little bit vulnerable in that if you're the opposition, you think stop Erling Haaland and you stop Manchester City. And if those wingers, as Annabelle pointed out, are statistically not getting the crosses in, and that's one of the things that he might thrive on, the other being his fast counter-attacking, and we don't play that, then you don't get the best out of him. So how much of Erling Haaland's slight drop-off in terms of numbers this year, and arguably his drop-off in form, is down to a lack of supply, and how much is it down to him, and how highly do you rate him?
Yeah, and another key there, I think you briefly mentioned it, was how Premier League defenses know him better than they did when he first came, and that's important too. And if you then throw in the self-doubt that's crept into the Man City team right now, I think it's hard just to pick on him and say, "Hey, it's down to you," because that dynamic, flowing play that carved open the opportunities for him to get all the goals that he's got, that's not happening anymore. And so I think it's a combination of the whole lot. I wouldn't put it down to him going through a bad patch that he's negative or that he's lost confidence. He's just expecting things to happen that aren't happening. Back in my days, a long time ago, but if things weren't happening, you drop further back the pitch. You try to get things going. You try to, you were busy trying to create something else that would make it happen. But City continue to play the way they do under Pep, as you said earlier, and it can be frustrating looking at Haaland, watching it when it's not coming off, as Annabelle says, out in the wings and what have you. De Bruyne not there creating these wonderful moments. The timing of his crosses, oh my God, some of them over the years, they're just such a delight to look back on. And these kind of things aren't happening now. So collectively, I suppose what I'm pointing to now is what the other clubs are feeling. You can mark Haaland now. City aren't as dynamic. They've lost a little bit of confidence. This is our day. We can sniff them. There's nervousness in the air. You can feel it. And I think that's where Pep finds his team. And it could just be that unlocking something that brings Haaland more into play, more touches. I look at the amount of touches he's had in games that City have lost, and do I blame him for not going back and getting the ball and wanting more touches, or trying to urge his teammates to come in and give him more? I don't really. I think it goes back to Pep's system, the way that he insists his players play. The plan B doesn't work. They've got this wonderful 6'4" dynamic, brilliant striker, but plan B isn't, okay, we go direct and we feed around him. Man City will never do that under Pep. So therefore, he is going to look isolated and he is going to look in the wilderness a little bit at times, which he has in some of these games. And and I'd have a sympathy for him. I'm in the strikers union as well, Ian. So I blame the wingers. uh,
I don't blame you for that at all.
yeah, no, I look, his goal scoring speaks for itself. In my day, nowadays, I don't know if there's any difference in the way people think about this, but the guy who scored the goals was the top dog because that was the hardest thing to do. And I think it still is. I know Salah's got a lot of penalties, but the way he scored a lot of his goals this year as well, dynamic, brilliant stuff, calmness under pressure, that as they say, ice in the veins of a striker, and they hit form and they're unstoppable. That they don't do that on their own. They do it because there's a big backup and there's great play going on around them, and that's just not happening for City. Therefore, it's not happening for Haaland. But it may just take one swashbuckling buckling performance from, five or six players for Haaland to look like the great player that we think he is. It's frustrating though. And whenever I watch him and I see the setup and I see the I suppose the play about to take shape, and you can see what Man City are trying to do, and you see a guy with his hands on his hips, but he's waiting for that moment to lose his markers. I think I'll finish out on this topic by going back to what I said a little bit earlier. Premier League coaches, and therefore what they pass on to their centre backs, can deal with him better than they did a couple of years ago. I really think that. I think they find ways of not cancelling him out. That's too hard because you got to have some sort of performance in you to do that. But there are very good defenders now in the league. They're as quick as him. They're as strong as him. I just suppose he's I say he's desperate now to get the next hat trick he gets. He'll be off and out the door. When will it come? I can't tell you exactly, but I think it'll only come when those players around him get their confidence back and the whole thing flows into a better beat.
Let me ask you another question, and believe me, this isn't a loaded question, but because you're a former chairman of a football club at Sunderland, where you also obviously played with great esteem, and I think you were the owner, weren't you, or pretty much the owner of Sunderland at one time?
Tiny bit of it, Ian, very small.
What would you, if you were the owner, the chairman of City, have sanctioned a 10-year contract for Erling Haaland?
Well, he's a huge asset no matter what happens. We always felt the new Man City ownership model was about world domination and whatever price it took to get there. And hence there's issues going on there, as we know, in the background of the Premier League and where the club might be. That's all happened, right? It's got to a point. Again, I think it's an overreaction to say they haven't done well. They should have bought more players in. The older ones might have been let go a bit sooner. That's a little bit too easy to say. I think we'll know an awful lot more about the ownership and the chairman and the way they're thinking when the summer comes, and the reset that I spoke about earlier that has to happen to make City come back out with all guns blazing next year. Then we'll know a lot more, because quite honestly, the easiest thing to do was to give Haaland a 10-year contract because everything's going so well for City. Look at what's happened over the last number of years. You've got a group here who, in the main, are essentially on that path of world domination. They've gone from moving the club to being a decent club with a great history into a breathtaking club that are making strides, in terms of its population, the population around the globe that now supports City. The whole infrastructure of what's happened at the football club is quite incredible. That's all great, and we're coming to a little blip. We'll know more, I think, from this blip in terms of the owner's intentions in the next few months. And I wouldn't like to call it, but one thing I would call, and I think I'm right in saying that it will be Pep that will be tasked with leading the charge back to greatness. And I'd imagine, that the transfer market will speak loudly in its favor, depending, of course, on what happens in the off-pitch stuff that's going on. But sometimes, they say a rest is as good as anything. And I mean, maybe a summer off from the doldrums, getting the thing back together, one or
That's not
two.
going to happen this summer, is it? Because they'll be over in America playing in
Well,
that Club World Cup.
playing in the World Cup, exactly. Well, maybe that'll springboard something as well. You don't know. Um, I just think, just to go back firmly on the question, and so, the Manchester City hierarchy. Manchester City hierarchy have a brand now that's incredibly recognized all over the world. Manchester United have two, and they've been in the doldrums for a long time. That's a big ship that's so hard to turn around and get it out there. Man City's at the moment is a super yacht, and it just needs to find the right waters and the right turn, and it'll get itself back. I can't see it. I cannot see Manchester City becoming Manchester United over the last number of years since Fergie left. How long is that? Too long. I'm not maybe not long enough for you guys following City.
But there's been a lot of talk among City fans. You may or may not be aware of it. But certainly, it's not just City fans. There's been protests, hashtag stop exploiting loyalty, about prices of season tickets going up. More specifically at City, there's not been availability of season tickets for a while. There is a stand extension. There's been lots of, I want to call it, infiltration of fans who are not really fans, who are sort of more tourists, etc. Um, you've been a player, as I say, you've been chairman, you are just like us, really. You're watching from the outside as well. So this isn't necessarily a specific City thing, but obviously we're City fans, so we're thinking it of a City thing. But what do you think of the direction that we're going in football, which seems to be at Premier League level to maximise profit, possibly at the not be caring as much, if you like, about the loyal fan base who we all admit, I go to every game home and away. I don't buy a new shirt every game. I don't spend fortunes in the shop. I don't, but the people who come on a time, now and again to games, they will spend far more money than I want. But there seems to be a feeling among a lot of the more traditional fans, if you like, that football's going away from wanting those types of fans who, on the whole, generate a lot of atmosphere and towards the bigger income streams. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think I'll just give you a quick history lesson to answer it better. And that is when the Premier League came into being, there was a huge furore about it, and Sky TV were coming along. And the only difference on day one was there was pom-pom dancers and the ball was different. That was it. Other than that, the game just carried on the way it was. But then, it started to attract more commercial investment, sponsoring, etc., TV, and suddenly the top players came from around the world. And then before you knew it, you had a most incredible commercial product. And if you go back to Richard Scudamore and the job he did in terms of, I suppose, globalizing the importance of the Premier League and creating this massive sort of TV pile for financing clubs that was coming from countries all around the world, all desperate to see this Premier League. I mean, that's the way it's been, and as a result, people want to come and watch the Premier League. I know I'm doing some work in the United States now, and they all plan a trip once a year. They try and get 2, 3 games in. Doesn't matter the club, and they bring lots of people with them. They're they might want to have 30, 40 tickets, and they're willing to pay far more for those 30, 40 tickets than the 30 or 40 fans that you're talking about. So it's created itself, this problem. The Premier League has created this, what we're calling a problem, but what the bean counters don't call a problem. And the world we live in, and particularly the commercialization of the Premier League, have they really ever stopped to consider the fan in that journey? I don't think it's certainly not a priority. I can remember in my time, we were in Sunderland, things were different up there, and it's all about the local economy, what have you. Um, Wondering, I asked how much can we charge here? I asked the board that question and what's appropriate. Now we were playing Chelsea and Abramovich, their tickets were 100 quid a game, ours were 28, something like that, or 25 even at the time, I think. So, you were at a disadvantage. And look, I would love if we got 50, 60, 70 quid at that time instead of the 25s. I didn't see it as a fan issue. I would have seen it as chairman of the club, doing my best to make sure we can get the best players in that we possibly can, that we can get the best structure that we really, push and get the revenues up. So I'm not shirking away from that, and by just saying, oh, they don't care. Um, I think the ideal, solution, if I'm being honest here, is some sort of halfway house whereby certain games are designated for, one-off sort of attendees, in certain section made, and then maybe others for the bigger games. I don't know, because it's a tough ask. I know the normal Man City fan. I go there often, as you know, Ian, when I can, whenever I'm over. And I know who makes the noise. I know who the real fans are. And I also know their background, where they come from. It's the same at Sunderland. It's a working class club, as Man City always was a working class club. But having said that, I also had a lovely meal in the halfway uh, beautiful sort of five-star restaurant, looking out through the glass at the players lining up for the game, and seeing the joy in all of these kids knocking on the window. It was back in the day when Aguero and co were there, and getting photos taken, and the money that was paid for that. The wealthy people were so thrilled to do that. So I'm not gonna I'm not gonna over criticize clubs, but I do think you got to be careful, because if and not saying this is going to happen, but if fans locally react and stop going to games, you got a problem. You got a real problem filling the place without a townie. So maybe it's a consideration. I'm not going to give out to anybody. I don't know enough about what each club is doing. Um, but just for the record, you cannot blame clubs for wanting to really commercialize their product so that they can compete and be the best, to give the fan the best team on the pitch. At the same time, they're at nothing without their loyal fan base. So some measure, and I do know a lot of clubs have forums with the fans and try and work together on this. I know that. I'm not sure where Man City are on that. I think they do. And I suppose that the best thing that can happen here is some common sense, and mediation always kind of works. So if the Man City fan base can speak to the club and come up with something that just eases it, throws some water on the debate, I think that would be best for all. But it'd be a shame that they get it wrong, and it detracts from what is really an amazing fan base that were so starved for so long, and now just when it gets good, just when the whole thing starts to pop up, that they're priced out of the market. That shouldn't happen either.